Good evening.
Anjana, it is live now. Okay.
Yeah. Shall we start?
You can start. Yeah, you can start. Pragya, can you stop sharing?
Okay. A very good evening to everyone. Firstly, I would like to share a beautiful poem. Let us fly like birds. Let us fly like birds without quarantine. Let us breathe unmasked like fellow creature. Let us flock together again like social animals. Let fear be microbial, optimism be virulent, illness be distance. Have a ravishing 2022. I, Dr. Anjana Talukdar, on behalf of Protection Academy, welcome each one of you for today's webinar. Today's topic is fallacies in hearing aid dispensing, and today's speaker is Pragya Bharadwaj. She is CEO and HOD of Interventional Audiology at Pratidhwani Center, Guwahati, and moderator of the session is Professor A.K. Biswas sir. He is senior lecturer in the Department of ENT, GMCS. Over to you, sir. Over to Biswas sir.
Sir, please unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear? Can
Yes,
you hear?
sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Good evening to all of you. Happy New Year 2022. All the esteemed member of the NEBOI and audiologists who are participating in today's program. Today, we have chosen a topic known as fallacies in dispensing hearing aid, and it will be presented by Pragya Bharadwaj. Pragya is a well-known audiologist. As all of you know, she does not need a introduction. Still, due to convention, I will tell. She has done her bachelor degree in speech and hearing from All India Institute of Speech and Hearing, Mysore. She has done her master's in audiology. We all are basically masters in speech and hearing, but she has done her master's in audiology. So her total concentration is audiology. She has done her master's in audiology from All India Institute of Speech and Hearing. In between, she worked with me for 5 months in Guwahati Medical College when she was intern of AISH. Afterwards, after completion of her master's, she has joined Pratiksha Hospital. She worked there for a few years. Then she joined in Nucleus in the cochlear implant. She worked there. She has learned the technology. Then after that, she's now working in Pratidhwani. She's the CEO and interventional audiologist at Pratidhwani. So she'll be giving talk on fallacies and dispensing hearing aid. Before going to the topic, I just wanted to tell few words. Like in dispensing hearing aids, basically 3 steps. First is you're assessing the need for amplifications. Then second step is we have to find out how well the patient will benefit from the amplifications. And third step is to determine the different parameters that is required for to overcome the hearing aid. So with these 3 basic guidelines that hearing aid dispensing starts. So Pragya will now highlight us about the different stages, different steps, requirement, roadmaps and all about the hearing aid dispensing. Over to Pragya.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. I would like to thank all the participants today who have joined us today. It's a weekday, and I can imagine that many of you might have had a busy practice day already. And thank you for stretching it a little longer and joining us. I would like to thank Pratiksha Academics to give me the platform to start this year's academic session. And a big thank you to Biswas sir for recommending this topic. I believe it's kind of a sensational topic, at least for us. And I may not be the most qualified person to talk a lot about hearing aids because my focus has always been more into diagnostics and cochlear implants. But I would try to do justice to the topic, and I would also request all my other expert colleagues to chip in wherever I may have missed out or faltered. Having said that, let's dive into it. And as we dive into this topic, I would like to bring your attention to the title or the name of the topic itself, especially the part of hearing aid dispensing. We say the term dispensing, use the term dispensing instead of selling when it comes to hearing aids. And before I elaborate more into it, I would like to put it out just for the record that hearing aids are categorized under medical devices by the US FDA, and their recent 21st CFR title defines hearing aids as any wearable instrument or device designed for, offered for the purpose of, or represented as aiding persons with or compensating for impaired hearing. So these are medical devices. As opposed to any technical product which can be sold by any individual or retailer to a customer based on their need. When we talk about dispensing, especially in case of a medical device, it is usually defined as provision or distribution of drugs, medicine, and such products on lawful prescription by trained and authorized professional. I would like to draw your attention on the highlighted parts over here, because that makes a lot of difference. Unfortunately, for a long time, and even now, in many cases, what is happening in case of hearing aids is more of selling rather than dispensing or a scientific way of fitting hearing aids. Who is authorized to dispense hearing aids worldwide? Again, there is a lot of discrepancies, or I would say a lot of variations from each and every country, and even within country, like in US, across different states, there are different regulations. This is a table I picked up from a sort of a little elaborate study which was published in the Bulletin of WHO in 2019. So here you can see they have highlighted the authorized providers and the training that they have to undergo in across different countries. And most of the time you'll see in most cases that they have mentioned audiologist who has university level degree, a graduation, post-graduation, or a doctoral level degree. And in certain countries, it is a little more expansive, where they have included ear specialists, ENT specialists, and in certain cases, they have also included audiometrists, who are more of a person with a technical education. But in every case, you will see that a minimum level of 1 year of a diploma training specializing in fitting of hearing aid is a must-have in all cases. What about in India? Under the scope of practice for audiologists outlined by the Indian Speech and Hearing Association, management and rehabilitation of hearing loss is enumerated, which includes assessment, selection, fitting, and dispensing of all kinds of assistive devices, including hearing aids. On a larger public health sector, the National Program for Prevention and Control of Deafness, which provides hearing aids and assistive devices to individuals with hearing loss. They also underline audiologists with a minimum 4 years graduate degree as authorized personnel to dispense hearing aid under the prescription of an ENT specialist. Now, as we saw that there in many countries, there are different courses apart from degree or a graduate or postgraduate degree for audiologists. There are different courses for specializing in selection and fitting of hearing aids. In India, this course is offered under the graduate and postgraduate programs for audiologists or audiologists and speech language pathologists, the dual degrees currently. Apart from this, there is a one-year diploma course in hearing aid and ear mold technology available in or run at Aish, Mysore, but that course specifies only training in repair and maintenance of hearing aids and not in fitting, selection and fitting of hearing aids. So to highlight, to summarize, currently in India, audiologists or ASLPs are the only people who have undergone the training that is required for selection, fitting, and dispensing of hearing aids. So what is the biggest fallacy over here? In our place, the biggest fallacy is, like in all other areas, the lack of general awareness and sufficient regulation with regards to dispensing of hearing aids. And because of that, we get to see things like this. Hearing aids are being sold online on Amazon. And what is so wrong about this? I guess I will be able to describe it or put forward a little more when we go through this entire presentation. In order to understand what are the fallacies, we need to know what is the right way or what are the fundamentals of the dispensing process for a hearing aid. Before I go into the process as such, I don't want to delve into technical details. I know the audience is not looking to learn technical terminologies over here, but there are certain terminologies which I will be using repeatedly. So just for the sake of ease for everyone, I would just like to rehash them very quickly. Number one, we'll be talking about the gain of hearing aids. Gain is nothing but the amplification a hearing aid is able to provide to the incoming acoustic signal at any given point of time. It is calculated by subtracting the input signal intensity from the output signal intensity. Frequency response curve is a frequency response curve, or the frequency range of a hearing aid is the range of frequency over which the hearing aid is able to give an effective amount of gain. It is usually measured by presenting input pure tone signals at 40 dB, 40 decibels, and the hearing aid set at a particular gain level, let's say around 60 decibels. And the output of the hearing aid is measured across different frequencies. Now the output of let's say we are setting the gain of the hearing aid at 60 decibels, meaning the hearing aid is supposed to amplify any input signal by 60 decibels. Okay, so if we are giving a signal at 40 decibels, input signal at 40 decibels, we expect the output at 100 decibels across all the frequencies. But that is not what we see in reality. And this is basically characterized by the hearing aid's physical characteristics, the size, the shape, the characteristics of the coupling device that we are using, the ear mold or the ear tip, what is the material being used, what is the size that is being used, what are the size of the vents that are being used, even the length of the tube which is connecting the ear mold to the hearing aid, even that makes a lot of difference. So even an inch or millimeters of changes in these physical characteristics can have a huge impact on the way the hearing aid is able to provide the output. Okay. Next is the compression function. Compression, okay. Now it is basically the function by which the hearing aid is able to vary the amount of gain that is being provided for input signals of different intensity levels. Now, we all know the sophisticated physiology of our inner ear or our cochlear hair cells, right? We are able to hear sounds as soft as water droplets falling at a distance to a loud cracker being burst right next to us, right? We are able to tolerate or able to hear a loud range of sounds. So we have a huge dynamic range thanks to the complex physiology of our outer hair cells. The electromotile property of the outer hair cells allows soft sounds to be amplified to some extent, while it also compresses or suppresses very loud sounds to maintain them within the comfortable and safe listening range of our ears. Okay. Now, what happens when there is a sensory neural hearing loss? Because there is a loss of the outer hair cells, the person's ability to hear soft sounds is reduced. So the minimum level of sound required for them to start hearing is elevated. And at the same time, because they have lost the cochlear non-linear amplification function or compression function, their ability, the maximum sound levels that they're able to tolerate also comes down. Okay, this is what is known as abnormal loudness growth or recruitment. That is a common complaint that we hear from a person with sensory neural hearing loss. So in order for a person with sensory neural hearing loss to hear all the sounds comfortably, the hearing aid not only needs to amplify soft sounds, it also needs to reduce the loudness of loud sounds so that it is within the comfortable listening range. And that is achieved by the compression function. Now, earlier previous hearing aids, which were known as linear hearing aids, would apply the same amount of gain to sounds of any input level, be it a soft input, soft signal of around 20 decibels to a loud signal of 90 decibels. It would apply the same amount of gain, and as a result, until the hearing aids output or ability to produce loud sound gets saturated. And you can imagine the havoc that it will wreak on a person with a sensory neural hearing loss. They'll be so uncomfortable. So current hearing aids, which are known as non-linear hearing aids, they are designed so that they provide more amount of gain to softer input signals. And as the input signal intensity increases, the amount of gain that the hearing aid provides gradually reduces. Okay, I will not go into any more technical definitions beyond this. Channels, you would have been hearing this term again and again. So what are channels is basically a series of digital filters that filters a broadband signal of multiple frequencies into its composition frequencies. Now, so what the hearing aid is able to do is it is able to apply its technology, like it's able to apply the gain, compression functions, and other features like controlling the noise, feedback suppression. All of that can be applied individually to different frequency components of the input signal based on the amount of hearing loss or requirement of the person. So this improves the clarity of the sound. Okay. So the general idea, more the number of channels, better the hearing or the clarity or the sound quality. However, there are studies which also highlight that beyond a certain number of channels, usually about 7 to 8 channels, the amount of difference that the person is able to perceive in the signal is not all that great, all that different. And the last one I would like to talk about very briefly is the fitting formula. So what are fitting formulas? Basically, these are complex algorithms to calculate the gain of the hearing aid for different input signal levels across different frequencies. Okay, so these are complex calculations which takes into consideration the air conduction thresholds, bone conduction thresholds, air-bone gaps, the uncomfortable loudness levels, the long-term average speech spectrum. All of that is taken into consideration to provide or give us a prescription of the amount of gain that needs to be given to a particular person. Now let's consider for this particular kind of an audiogram, when we feed this kind of an audiogram, based on the fitting formula that we choose, the gain prescribed by the software for the particular hearing aid will vary. Okay, and as an audiologist, thankfully, we don't need to do these calculations for each and every patient ourselves. Thankfully, the softwares usually come pre-fit with these formulas. But as an audiologist, we should be knowing which fitting formula is appropriate to which group of people or which individual and select accordingly. In many cases, if we are sitting, feeding in information correctly, even that part is done by the hearing aid, but sometimes we need to make changes based on the person. Now, moving on, let's discuss quickly about the fundamental process of hearing aid fitting. Like this was already highlighted at the beginning of the session. The first thing is we need to understand the need of the hearing, and this is the most important basic step where we tend to falter. This is the first step itself where we most of the times go wrong. Okay, I always feel, in my personal opinion, carrying out a proper pure tone audiometry is more challenging than carrying out an electrophysiological test like a BERA, because a pure tone audiometry is very subjective. It depends on the tester as well as it depends on the subject. It depends on your patient's level. It depends on the room acoustics. It depends on your instrument, a lot of things. And of course, your experience. So first step is getting the accurate hearing profile. And this is usually not possible with a single test. What happens in most cases is an audiologist is referred a case by the primary physician with the advice of one or two particular tests. In case of adults, it's mostly pure tone audiometry along with tympanometry. And in case of children, it's mostly an ABR. If we are just following the single test that is being advised to us, what may go wrong? Let's take a case where we are doing an ABR and we don't get any response at the highest signal intensity. So we come to a conclusion of severe to profound hearing loss. Now this response or this interpretation can be obtained for a person who has an audiogram that looks like this, a classical severe to profound hearing loss. The prognosis of this person with a hearing aid may not be that great, and we may consider a cochlear implant for this person. But this interpretation may also be obtained. Now we know that clinically, we do an ABR with a stimulus known as the click stimulus, which is a broadband signal with its energy concentration mainly in the 2 to 4 kilohertz region. So we are getting information mainly about the 2 to 4 kilohertz region. So the same ABR interpretation may also be obtained for a case who has an audiogram which looks like this, or maybe an even more residual hearing in the lower frequencies. As long as the hearing loss exceeds 90 decibels or it's in the severe range at 2 kilohertz and higher frequencies, we will get an absent ABR. But will we straight away consider a cochlear implant for this person? No, we would probably consider giving them an open fit hearing aid, maybe even a custom hearing aid with the amount of technology that is available. And because the candidacy criteria for cochlear implant is expanding over the time, maybe we will consider a cochlear implant for this person later on. But of course, our clinical decision will not be the same for the two audiograms. Now, most interestingly, we may also get an audiogram which looks like this. And because the hearing loss, there's a notch at 2 kilohertz, we will still, if we just do an ABR, may still get a absent response. And this case, would our clinical decision be the same? Of course not. In this case, we may just fit a person with a custom hearing aid or maybe even an open fit BT hearing aid, right? So what I mean to say is that an ABR in itself cannot give us an accurate hearing profile. Neither can an audiogram. In case of a child, if you're just relying on the audiogram, the chances of overestimating their hearing loss or sometimes underestimating is very high. So we may have to do an ABR to verify it objectively. And we may have to sometimes do a tympanometry to know the status of their external middle ear before we are stuffing it up with hearing aids and ear molds and whatnot. So there is a whole range of tests which are available with us, but what we need to do in which case is what we need to customize based on our clinical knowledge. And we cannot be getting an accurate hearing profile for a person without consulting the primary referring ENT specialist or the primary referring physician. What are the complaints? Since when are they seeing this patient? Since when is this person complaining of hearing loss? Does this person have any other issues? Does he have any other physical or cognitive issue? So unless and until we know that, we cannot proceed with a proper understanding of the person's auditory profile. In many cases, it's a little difficult for us to convince a person to do additional tests as an audiologist. And in this case also, again, getting this advice from the primary referring physician makes our life a lot more easier. And of course, in many cases, we may have to repeat measures if it's a fluctuating hearing loss, or if it's a hearing loss with additional conductive component, progressive hearing loss. We may not be able to get the final stable response in the first test itself. We may have to repeat measures whenever necessary. So where we usually go wrong is in the highlighted areas. In most cases, in our test battery, many of the audiologists leave out the speech audiometry. In our case for a long time, availability of a standard test material was an issue, but that is not the case anymore. In case of pediatrics, it's still there, but we need to find a way to find out their speech perception or speech. We need to carry out the speech audiometry. The other two steps also, many cases audiologists do miss out these steps, and that results in an inaccurate hearing profile, which leads to the whole system or the whole process going wrong. The second step in understanding the need is to understand the subjective need. When I say subjective need, we need to know a couple of things. First of all, like, what is the patient's own perception of the problem? We might, all of us might have come across patients who would have said that, I don't have a problem. I don't have any hearing problem. It's my son or my daughter or my wife that keeps complaining that I can't hear, or I cannot, I'm talking too loudly or whatnot. On the other end of the spectrum, there may be people who barely have any hearing loss, but then their perception of the issue is very huge. Maybe the tinnitus, associated tinnitus, or maybe their difficulty in understanding speech and noise is bothering them to a huge extent, because of which they need management urgently. So we need to know where the patient is at in terms of perception of their problem. There are a lot of standardized questionnaires which are available in order to get this information. For an example, displayed over here is the AFAB. So here you can see there are very elaborate descriptive questions about different hearing scenarios that can give us a lot of information about all of these factors. There are about 22 questions like this. There are other hearing subjective questionnaires like the COSI or the hearing handicap inventory, which can be used to get this information. But according to one of the surveys, in more than 90% of the hearing aid evaluations, these questionnaires are not being used. Why? One of the major reasons is time constraint. These, the initial audiological diagnostic evaluation itself takes time. In case of an adult, anywhere between 15 to 30 minutes. In case of children, it takes a lot longer. When a person comes to the clinic, because of the lack of awareness about the entire system, when they come to a clinic for hearing aid, they come with an idea to buy the hearing aid. They are ready to pay so and so amount of money, and they want to buy the hearing aid and go back home at a reasonable amount of time. But the process of understanding the need, it takes time, and we have to be able to make the patient understand why we are asking these questions and what are we going to get out of it, what are they going to get out of it. Because these questionnaires are developed in Western countries, some of these questions may not be as applicable in our scenarios, and the most common or most practical reason of these questionnaires not being used is that many of the people are not even familiar that these materials exist, or that they are available, or where they are available. All right. So frankly, I would say that even I don't use these questionnaires in all of my hearing aid evaluations, honestly. But what I do is, during my conversation with the patients, I have gone through these questionnaires and I have figured out what are the questions that I need to ask, what are the factors that I need to focus on in order to provide a good fitting experience to the person. So that is at least the least that we can do. Next fundamental step is selection of the technology. And in selection of the technology, first thing is what type of hearing aid that we are going to get. There's a huge whole array of hearing aid sizes and shapes which are available, starting from the BTE hearing aids to the smaller and smaller, completely in the canal hearing aids. And then comes the hearing aid specification, the core technical specification of the hearing aid, which includes the gain of the hearing aid, the frequency response, the compression functions, the channels. So these are the core things that we need to focus on when we are selecting the technology. And how do we make this decision? First thing, we need to look at their audiogram. So a frequency specific response through an audiometry or through an ASSR or whatever is extremely important when we are selecting the technology. As we know, different types of hearing aids are suitable for different types of hearing loss. Many a times a person with severe to profound loss, or a child with severe to profound loss are brought to us with the expectation of a small in the ear or in the canal hearing aid, which is not suitable for them. These hearing aids are only suitable for lesser amount of hearing loss, maybe up to moderate degrees of hearing loss. Apart from this, we again, apart from the audiogram itself, we also need to think about the physical condition of the person. A person who may be having a lesser degree of mild to moderate degree of hearing loss, if they have a dexterity issue, if they are elderly and they have a visual issue, visual problem, they are not able to manipulate the tiny controls or even change the batteries of the hearing aid, then there's no use of giving them a small custom hearing aid. We may have to give them a larger hearing aid, which is easier, which controls are easier to manipulate, which easier for them to use, basically. So all of these information we will get from our subjective needs assessment. Next, we have to look at the hearing aid features. There are a zillion features. This is the amount of technological innovations which are there. There's a zillion features available with the hearing aid, and they are coming up with new ones every day almost. And these features are not like just there. These features are developed with a lot of research undergone behind them because somebody somewhere felt the need of it. So we need to first of all understand what are these features, what are these technological advancements about, and how they can benefit our patients. And that's how we can decide which are the features which are applicable or useful for our particular patient. And again, for this, where do we need to go back? We need to go back to their needs assessment. What is their lifestyle like? How active they are? What kind of listening environment do they spend most of their time in? What are the issues that the person is feeling? Is it the tinnitus which is bothering them? Is it the lack of or the low audibility which is bothering them? Or is it the noisy environment which is bothering them? What do we need to take care of in this particular person? Okay, and also their previous experience with hearing aid. What was the issue that they had with the previous hearing aid, and that how can we address that issue at this point of time? And most important at this point of time in selecting a hearing aid features is the person's speech perception scores in quiet as well as in noise. Many of the time our audiological clinics are we have a quieter environment. We have sort of an unreal environment, if we have to say. And so many of the times a person who is happy, who is satisfied at the clinic, go outside and then they are absolutely unhappy because of the amount of noise which is there in the environment. So we need to replicate or test the speech perception scores or the speech abilities in noise to get a proper understanding. Now, just to give a few examples. Now, let's say we have a child diagnosed. So in case of a child, what are our main goals of fitting a person with a hearing aid? First thing, we need to maximize audibility. We need to make sure that this child is hearing all the sounds in their environment, especially all the speech sounds are audible to this child because they need that for language development. They're in their language development stage. Apart from that, we need to make sure that the hearing aid that they're wearing is comfortable to wear so that they keep it in their ear, and also that it is durable because they'll be using it for their lifetime, for a long period of time. So it needs to be durable. The chances of wear and tear is much higher. So how do we address this? First thing is, in case of a child, what kind of hearing aid we will use? Regardless of the degree of hearing loss, we usually prefer to fit them with BT hearing aids with custom ear molds because the ears are still growing in size and shape. So we cannot keep changing the hearing aid. What we need to do is we need to get a custom ear mold which is comfortable and snugly fit in the ear. We need to look at the gain and frequency response of the hearing aid. For a child, this will make a lot of difference because let's take this example. Now, with hearing aid 2, if you say the effective frequency response of the hearing aid where they're able to give an effective gain is up to about 4 kilohertz. Whereas for hearing aid 1, it is to a larger degree, to about around 6 kilohertz. So between these two hearing aids, if the child is fitted with the second one, the chances of the child missing out on sounds, the high frequency sounds like f, s, th are higher. So when they are learning language, the chances of them mishearing the sounds she as he, or difficulty in differentiating between C versus she, difficulty in hearing sounds that starting with f is higher. So what is going to happen? They are going to not learn these words, and as a result, their pronunciations of these sounds will be absent. So even the small difference in the frequency response of the hearing aid can make a lot of difference in case of a child. So we need to be very careful about that. Apart from that, in case of children, because they have small ear canals, one of the biggest challenge is ability to give enough gain without causing feedback. So we need to look at the feedback cancellation technology in the hearing aid. And also we need to make sure that the hearing aid is built to last. It is robust, not easily prone to wear and tear. Higher IP rating, ingress protection rating, which gives us information about how well protected the hearing aid is against dust and exposure to dust and moisture or water. Higher IP rating is an important factor, especially when we are talking about fitting a child. Let's say in case of an adult, what are our main goal? This adult has had experience. In most cases, they have had experience of hearing. So when they have a hearing loss, their complaint of recruitment or abnormal loudness growth is very high. So in case of an adult, it's not just audibility, but the comfort of listening becomes a primary goal. The clarity of speech as well as an cosmetic appeal, because they are an active member of the society. The cosmetic appeal of the hearing aid is an important factor for them, as well as versatility of the hearing aid. So how do we, address that? For a lesser degree of hearing loss, we would usually prefer a custom hearing aid, ranging from a larger ITE hearing aid to a CIC hearing aid, whichever is suitable for them. But for same degree of hearing loss, if it's a sloping hearing loss, we may not prefer or custom hearing aid, which is fit in the ear, may not be comfortable for this person, because it will be occluding the ear and increasing the low frequencies, which are almost normal, even more. So it will be uncomfortably loud for this person. So in this case, even if we are going for a custom hearing aid, we have to go for a larger one with venting. Venting is an artificial channel which is created at the ear canal level in a hearing aid or a ear mold, which allows low frequencies to come out and thereby prevents excess amplification of low frequency. So venting becomes important. And in many cases, we would prefer an open fit behind the ear hearing aid, a hearing aid which is behind the ear, but the part which is going inside the ear canal is also not occluding. And even in cases where they have a conductive component, having an open fit hearing aid would be more suitable. But as the amount of hearing loss increases, the chances or the benefit that they will get with a custom hearing aid again reduces. So we don't have any choice but to go for a behind the ear hearing aid, which is able to give more power or more amplification to cover the amount of loss. Again, in these cases, in terms of features, the noise cancellation of features, the adaptive features, adaptive in terms of the microphone directionality, adaptive features is very important, because they would be in different listening situations. So the hearing aid should be able to adapt to different listening situations. Streaming and connectivity is a feature which is very important these days, plays a very important role, and many of the hearing aids have come up with this feature. So this is something which will be important in this case. So this is where we need to be able to justify the budget of the hearing aid to the person based on the need of the person. With the increase in the number of features, increase the budget of the hearing aid is definitely going to increase. So this is where we need to make them we need to make a judgment about what are the features that we need to include and where do we need to cut the cost. Now let's come to an older adult who probably, again, in this case, also comfort becomes a very important person. They are very reluctant to wear a hearing aid, as many of us would have seen. Many of the elderly people are very reluctant to wear the hearing aid. So for them, hearing in comfort of hearing is a very important factor, so that they use the hearing aid that is given to them. Clarity of speech is absolutely important, because with age and with long-term hearing loss, they usually will have processing difficulty. So even if they're able to hear sounds, they will have difficulty in understanding. So having clarity of speech is again very important for their speech perception. A modular hearing aid, which is easier to use with larger controls, is useful in these cases. So for a hearing loss in this range, we can still think about a larger custom hearing aid like an ITE or an open fit behind the ear hearing aid. With the increase in hearing loss, again, we would prefer a behind the ear hearing aid. So compression function, as we had talked about, becomes very important in these cases to ensure comfort of listening. Noise cancellation and feedback is absolutely important, so that, again, to address the comfort issues. So what I'm trying to make you understand through these slides is that regardless, even with the same audiogram, depending on the age, depending on the lifestyle, the kind of hearing aid, the features that we will select will vary from person to person. And this is where we need to use our knowledge of the technology and our clinical judgment. And the third most important thing is optimizing. So we have the technology, we have the hearing aid with us. How do we optimize it for this particular person? Our job doesn't end with the selection, right? So optimizing, in the first place, what we need to do is we need to optimize the fit of the hearing aid in the ear. If it's a custom hearing aid, or whether it's a custom here in case of a custom hearing aid, or in case of behind the ear hearing aids where we need to take ear modes, we need to take precise and accurate impressions. That is again where many of the people still make mistakes. It's reducing over time. This is where people need to get trained and need to get hands-on training and practice, because this small thing, like I said, can make a huge difference in the usability of the hearing aid. And like I said, use of appropriate tube lengths, the appropriate size of ear tips, even those things makes a huge difference in the optimization process. Step 2 is optimizing the programming parameters. Again, this is a little bit of technical process. So like I said, the fitting formulas are already provided in the hearing aid. Once we select the appropriate fitting formula, even then we need to further listen to the person. When the person is wearing the hearing aid, we need to ask questions and we need to figure out what is their experience with the hearing aid. Now, for example, if a person is feeling that they're the door closing, or the loud sounds are too loud, intolerable for them, then we have to reduce the gain that is given for the high intensity sounds. If the person feels, many times the person says that I feel like my own voice is echoing or it's very boomy. So in those cases, many times reducing the amplification for the low frequency sounds usually helps. There sometimes people feel that I can hear you, but then your voice sounds very tinny, very metallic. So that means the amplification for the high frequency sounds are too loud. So depending on the complaint of the person, we need to optimize or further fine-tune the amount of gain and compression and all of those features. And the most important step is, we have done all our optimization. We need to ensure that whatever we have done, whatever manipulations we have done, is actually giving the output that we are expecting. Yes, subjectively, the person is saying something to us at that particular point of time, but the gold standard for verification of a hearing aid fitting is to do real ear measurements. So real ear measurements involves a particular set of instrumentation, which includes a microphone, a reference microphone kept at the ear level near the microphone of the ear hearing aid, another probe microphone which is put inside the ear canal near the eardrum, which records the output of the hearing aid at the individual ear canal level, and a receiver which produces specific signals, and that helps us in making calculations like the overall gain of the hearing aid, what is the compression function, what is the speech output of the hearing aid that the person is getting. not many clinics or centers are using real year measurements, including my own center. We are currently not using real year measurements. Reason is, one is the availability or our access to the instrumentation itself. Second thing is the cost of the instrumentation. It is available now. We know that it is available, but it is a costly affair. And more than that, it's the maintenance of the instrumentation, which is further more difficult. It requires very precise calibration at regular interval, which is not possible in the in situ, in the clinic level. It needs to be sent back to the the headquarters, which again, it's kind of a hassle. So all of the thought process is somewhere holding us back, but we hope that we get our accessibility is increases in the future, and soon we are able to use real year measurements in real practice. At least in the absence of real year measurements, what we need to do to verify is aided responses, responses for different hearing aids that we are fitting, comparing them not just in terms of their peer tone thresholds with the hearing aid, but their speech perception in quiet as well as in noise. And then finalizing, while finalizing, there are many things that we need to. First of all, we need to make the person understand what we are giving, how do they need to use it, why do they need to use it, and how long, and all of that information. Secondly, there are a lot of things that needs to be, we need to consider. Suppose there are 50 features in the hearing aid. Do we activate or apply all of them at the same time, or do we give some time for the person to get used to, and then we make those changes in the future? Many a times a person who has had long-standing hearing loss, they at the time of fitting, sometimes they feel the sound is too loud, and in those cases we may have to let them go through what is known as acclimatization, gain acclimatization, where the hearing aid gain is at a lower level, and as the person uses it, gradually it increases over a fixed period of time. So all of that, and then explaining the care and maintenance. In my personal opinion, we absolutely need to take time in explaining the care and maintenance of the hearing aid. Otherwise we are liable for it. They are going to come back to us for the smallest thing. People come back to me from large distances with the complaint that they're not able to hear, and all we find out is that the ear tip is jammed with wax. So if we take up the pain to explain to them these small steps, small few things that they need to do to maintain their hearing aid, that can go a long way. And of course, this is not the end. This is not the end of our responsibility as a dispenser. This person is now our responsibility for the rest of the time they're using the hearing aid. We need to keep following up with the patient from time to time. They are going to have issues. Their hearing loss may increase. The hearing aid it's an electronic item. It may fail. It may not function optimally. So we need to be able to address it correctly from time to time. And we should not be in the mindset that my job is done once we have dispensed the hearing aid. It's absolutely not. It's just the start of the process. So usually, to summarize, this is usually the recommended flow of action is to understand the need, quantify the problem through audiometric tests, select the right technology and compare the different technologies that you have selected, optimize it to the patient, verify it, and then prescribe or dispense it. But in practical scenario, many of the times what is happening is people usually quantify the problem, they do their audiometry, they do their tests. Instead of understanding the need of the patient, what we only focus on is the budget. Of course, it's an important part of understanding the need, but that's not the only thing. Instead of optimizing, what we end up doing is only programming the hearing aid, and we sort of skip the whole optimization process. And this is usually due to lack of time, due to lack of understanding, maybe the skills, lack of knowledge of what needs to be done. And then we prescribe or dispense the hearing aid. And sometimes even the programming part does not take place in many cases. So this is where in practical scenario, this is happening. And this is the reason why there are so many dissatisfied hearing aid users. So this is one of the reasons that I can figure out. And now that is all that I had to share from my end. We can discuss further. Any questions or opinions from anyone?
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Praka, I think you have missed one point, that is monorail fitting versus binaural fitting.
Right.
That is the point that has to be discussed, because binaural hearing aid always has advantage over monorail hearing, because in the binaural hearing, as in a natural situation, it helps us to determine the direction of sound as well as assimilation of sound, signal to noise ratio increases. So binaural hearing is always an advantageous than the monorail hearing.
Right, sir. Right. I skipped.
And one point I just wanted to add, that there is a flow chart which says that that was a earlier chart which says that at 0 to if the loss is between 0 to 25, that is 0 to 25 decibel, there is no need of hearing it. And if the loss is between 25 to 40 dB, they are the part-time user of hearing aid. And if the loss is between 40 to 55, that's the frequent need of hearing aid. But these people, even their frequent need of hearing aid, even in the bad situations in terms of competing noise or in terms of signal to noise ratio increases, they perform poorer even in the difficult situation also. And if the loss is between 55 to 80 decibel, that is the area of greatest satisfaction. So area of greatest satisfaction means, it doesn't mean that the patient will get all the benefits, but they are the regular user of hearing aid. They use hearing aid regularly, and the benefits they get in the non-competing sound noise situation, and without competing signal to noise ratio, the performance is as poor as in the normal situation. And if the loss is more than 80 decibel, they are the greatest need that they are in a partial help from the hearing aid. That was a flowchart that was given early, although there is modifications at that, but this is a flowchart. It gives a good idea when the hearing aid has to be prescribed.
Pragya, could you just stop the screen share?
Yeah.
Hello.
There are a few questions in the chat box.
Yeah. I'm just opening them up. Yeah, so Sanchita, you have asked about the difference between open fit and closed fit. So simply put, closed fit hearing aids are the ones where the hearing aid or part of the hearing aids, maybe the ear mold, is occluding the ear canal. So it is completely covering up the concha and the ear canal. So they are known as closed fit hearing aids. Be it the custom hearing aids like CIC or ITC hearing aids, or the BT hearing aids using ear molds. But when we talk about open fit hearing aids, this means that they use slimmer tubes or small ear tips, which is not completely closing up or occluding the ear canal. So these kind of hearing aids are usually beneficial when there is a sloping hearing loss, more degrees of hearing loss in the higher frequencies and lesser degrees of hearing loss in the lower frequencies. Usually the open fit behind the ear hearing aids are kind of the most versatile hearing aids. At present, they're able to cover a huge range of hearing loss, or they cover a huge fitting range usually.
It's mandatory, Pragya, if I can just add on.
Yeah.
It's mandatory that we use an open fit if your 500 hertz threshold is more than 25 dB, better than 25 dB, then we must use a open fit, and that will give him basically the 500 hertz threshold gives you an idea of how much of venting needs to be given. Whenever you need more than 2.5 mm vent, you should think of an open fit.
Thank you, sir.
If I can just add on
Yes.
few important things. I was actually thinking of based on the fallacies. Okay, so there are few fallacies that is very prevalent and common. Is many of it you have covered. I'm just talking about things that you have probably not elaborated much. Is one is only good hearing threshold measurement is enough. This is what something that we all think of. Now, you talked about a hearing profile, and I just wanted to highlight that it's a frequency specific measurement of hearing which is important. Okay, but then only measurement of threshold is not enough, because you talked about recruitment, you talked about how loudness contours can be different. So we need to give these inputs to the software for it to program your intensity compressions. Your hearing aid DSL and NAL2 will work only when it has got the data. Not everyone has got the same hearing threshold data. Not everyone has got the same loudness contour, especially in cases of sensory neural hearing losses. So you also need to measure the UCL levels. Okay, ideal is measure threshold, MCL and UCL, but at least threshold and UCL. Second is aided thresholds. If at all you are doing aided thresholds, people think that aided threshold, as long as it is there in Speech Banana, it is enough. But we must highlight that this aided thresholds, unless and until it is in the upper border of Speech Banana, it is not enough.
Right.
Because aided thresholds are the best possible thresholds. It is when the gain is maximum, it's in the quiet, and it's just detection. So it needs to be in the upper region of Speech Banana, that is audibility. But then another important thing is the clarity. Unless and until the thing is clear, you will not get a satisfaction. Now, about this clarity, you talked about SNRs and speech audiometry, that is SDS, right? Speech discrimination or speech identification scores.
Scores, yes, sir.
Yeah. Now, what we miss out, especially while working with elderly, is their language processing speed and their cognitions. So all our speech material are small units. They don't require a lot of memory to remember. But normally when we are speaking in at least 4 to 5 syllables. So, and we are measuring, while testing, we are measuring 1 syllable. So your working memory or auditory memory is not challenged. So that is something very important. Why people may understand or do well in your SIS scoring, but they are not happy or they cannot follow continuous speech. Their working memory is lesser. So basically, you also have to assess conversational speech performances in conversational speech. And there is a big confusion about the channels. You highlighted on it. Okay, and I'm thankful that you mentioned that 7 to 8 channels are important, the most important thing. Beyond that is probably just an addition. But here, what makes an important decision is these channels are also in 3 different parts of your hearing aid. One, what channels traditionally mean is the amplifier channels, and that is what optimal should be 7 to 8. You don't need more than that. But then these channels are also used in the pre-amplifier stage as well as the microphone stage. And it is in these stages where a huge number of channels are important. Microphone can have about 48 to 64 channels. Your preamplifier can have or should have at least 20 channels. Your Adro is an example of a preamplifier technology which works at 22 channels. Okay, can be made even at 60 channels, Adro. But so this preamplifier and microphone stages are where you require high number of channels. But where if you have a lot of number of channels in the amplifier, what is the pitfall of it? It makes the circuit slower.
Very slow.
So you may miss out on certain updating. So if you have to have a high number of channels, you also need a very fast processor. And a very fast processor with high number of channels pushes up your budget. So that is where your optimize. I love that word optimization. Is very much needed. Okay. Rest, I agree with all the points that you made, and Vishwasa made a beautiful point of very basic is binaural. You need to have a binaural. That's one of the most basic thing. Counsel also pointed out on something is what about unilateral hearing loss. Now this is where Vishwasa's point comes in. Like even an unilateral loss is missing out on the binaural fitting. Okay, so as long as possible, you need to amplify unilateral hearing. In case it cannot be amplified, you need to give that information so that the 360-degree mode is active, like in cross
hearing.
Yes. In case the cross is not giving enough because cross does not give binaural cues, that is when we need to restore that hearing with a implant. And in adults now, unilateral hearing implantation is a clinical procedure, clinically recommended procedure. It is also being evaluated for children as well. Okay, so that was my take on this. I actually loved the topic, and even at 6 o'clock when I saw this, I said I must attend this.
Thank you so much, sir. You answered quite a few questions in the chat already.
Okay.
Most of them were about unilateral hearing loss, so thank you for elaborating on that very nicely.
Pragya, there are some more questions.
Yeah.
Dr. Digonto Das is asking, please sum up the use of hearing aided tinnitus.
Okay. So physiological, now what we have seen in most cases of tinnitus is that tinnitus is not only a physiological process, but it also has a psychological component. So what we have usually seen in many cases, tinnitus, the perception of tinnitus itself is usually a lot worse when the person is in a silent situation. In many cases, most of the cases, when the person is in a silent situation, and usually when they're going to bed, when they're not hearing a lot of other sounds, that is where the perception of tinnitus is increases. So what we need to focus on in case of tinnitus is to make it or help the person get adapted to it. So how hearing aid can help with tinnitus is that it will increase or improve the audibility of the surrounding sounds, the audibility of the important sounds for this person, audibility of speech, or the audibility of the environmental sounds, which in turn helps them or kind of shifts their focus from the tinnitus that they're having. And many cases we have seen that once they're able to hear well enough with a hearing aid, their perception of tinnitus as such diminishes or reduces. There in certain hearing aids, they come with the feature of a tinnitus masker or an additional sound that the hearing aid produces, which is supposed to help a person get adapted to the tinnitus. Personally, I am not very sure how helpful that is. Maybe Chandan sir or Biswas or anybody else can elaborate on that. This is my understanding how hearing aid usually can help with tinnitus.
Pragya, question from Khansar. Chandan sir has already pointed out, what is your take on unilateral hearing loss? If you want to add anything on it. And second part of the question is, what is the minimum loss you would recommend hearing aid, sorry.
See, again, here the question comes is about how we are using our auditory system. So when it comes to children, even a minimum degree, a minimal mild degree of hearing loss can have deleterious effects on them in their language development, in their academic skills, in a lot of, because when it comes to listening in a real environment, when in a noisy environment, even that minimum or mild hearing loss can affect, they'll be missing out on syllables, on sounds, which will affect their ability to process the information, and that can have a very severe effect. So in case of, especially in case of children, no doubts, any degree of hearing loss, we would recommend amplification. In case of adults also, what happens is, if we are leaving the hearing loss untreated, this person, the adult, will also go through the same issues. They, in challenging situations, they will be missing out on information. They'll be missing out on maybe 1 or 2 syllables, which itself will alter or make them misinterpret the information. So what will happen is, it will prevent their ability to participate in a social conversation, ability to participate in a social environment itself. And that in turn gradually, makes them, gets them into the process of isolation. They slowly, stop participating in conversations, or they slowly start ignoring conversations, and which in turn gradually has the auditory deprivation effect on their central auditory system. So what happens is, even if their hearing loss as such is not increasing, their ability to process information, their of the central auditory system, that gradually deteriorates, and that in turn becomes very difficult to address at a later stage. Once the central system gets involved, and once its ability gets diminished, that is very difficult to address at a later stage with a hearing aid or any other device. So we need to ideally give a good amount of amplification to address any degree of hearing loss. But then again, we have to consider the subjective need and subject's own perception in place to get optimum satisfaction.
Okay, Pragya, next question is, what hearing aid would you like to recommend for an elderly lady with a central perforation with severe mixed loss and who doesn't want to go for surgery?
The severe mixed loss. See, first of all, it's an elderly woman. We need to consider the airborne gap which is there. The amount of bone conduction, their bone conduction threshold, where that is at, we have to, our first choice will be with a behind the ear hearing aid, because first thing, looking at the age of the person, it's easier to control. Looking at the amount of hearing loss, the person would require higher power. And so a behind the ear hearing aid, we need to give trial with a behind the ear hearing aid with appropriate fitting formulas. And up to severe degree of hearing loss, we should be able to get good enough benefit with the current hearing aids which are available. So that would be my recommendation.
Pragya, there was a point of with a perforation. I mean, a perforation, if we are giving a hearing aid, we are introducing an infection, chances of infection. Yeah. So your choice of BTE was an excellent thing, wherein you have a mold, and I would insist on a hard mold which can be sterilized. And what has worked with me in recent times is giving them a 2 set of molds, hard molds. Now these hard molds can be sterilized, can be kept in an UV, so that you reduce the chances of infection growing on the mold. And I like to give a venting on the mold as big as can be given, so that the ear is not blocked. In case a venting is not possible, I also advise them to take that hearing aid out intermittently, and not to wear it at a stretch for long. Okay, so infection control is another important thing which can be taken care if you are using a BT.
Thank you, sir.
Pragya,
Yeah.
next question is from Fukon sir.
Hmm.
He's asking, how will you remove stigma and counsel regarding the expectation in a deaf person?
For the person himself or herself, I think it's the practical experience that they get, which is the biggest way, or which is the most convincing way to, or to convince them basically to remove any stigma that they have. We need to take time in giving trials. We need to verify it. We need to give them, we need to let them experience with the hearing aid in different situations in the sense, at least, in a noisy environment, in the silent environment, have conversations with us, with the family members. And when we are doing aided speech perceptions test in a noisy situation, we are able to show them the difference in their scores. That is one way of, objectively showing them what is the hearing aid adding to their, perception. And again, the stigma has grown because of the fallacies that has been following for a long period of time. So the only way of, getting over it is for us to start practicing in the right way, start understanding the process and practicing it in the right way. There's no other way, and there is no shortcut for it to, for us to get over it in 1 day or 2 days. We have to practice it for a period of time in order to reverse the idea that the people already have for hearing aids. Yeah, that's my take on it.
Pragya, moving on to the next question. Fukon sir as well as Dr. J. Rahman wants to know more about cross in single-sided deafness. And Fukon sir has also made a comment, cross helps. Is it replaced by Baha these days?
Okay. So, yeah, cross hearing aid and Baha, both of them function in the way that, so cross hearing aids, what is basically doing is it is not able to give binaural hearing as such. It's not able to give all of the binaural advantages in terms of maybe, understanding speech and noise or the fine localization, but it is able to give a 360-degree perception. Like Chandan sir already said, it is able to at least help the person catch all of the sounds which are coming in the environment. The benefit with cross is a little, the reports are a little variable. I myself have not had an experience of fitting a cross hearing aid, so I think the experienced people can give a little more detail about it. And in terms of Baha, so again, Baha, what it's doing is, in certain cases, Baha may be a little more effective in the sense that because cross hearing aid, it is picking up sound, is applying some amount of amplification and giving it to the sound ear, which is normal. So there again, there may be, issues of finding comfort, comfortable listening with that. In case of Baha, what is happening is we are again picking up the sound from the affected ear, and the vibrations it is vibrating through the bone conduction mode. And as we know, in the bone conduction mode, it is the better cochlea which is going to respond. So ultimately, the sound is getting lateralized to the non-affected or the better ear. But in Baha, because the sound is traveling through the bone conduction mode, the effectiveness of the loss of signal in transmission and the comfort may be a little more, but then again, there we have to think about the surgical options. So it is a trade-off. In both cases, in cross and Baha, we are not getting the true binaural hearing, but we are getting the 360-degree sound scope in case of unilateral hearing loss.
Pragya, BAHA in the unilateral hearing loss is a cross hearing aid only. It's called transcranial cross.
Hmm.
Okay, and the one that we talk about cross is the wireless cross. Okay, the differences depend on what is the frequency response that we are able to deliver. When we are using a cochlear BAHA, then actually the frequency responses are slightly higher. But then wireless cross system, the present day wireless cross systems are also giving about 6 kilohertz bandwidth in a cross wireless crosses. So that point is also there. Now the differences are in a BAHA, you have to use only one device, and that too not visible. But in a wireless cross, you have to use two devices on the 2 ears, which is quite visible. But then the downside of a BAHA is, as you said, surgical requirement and the cost. Cost of a good wireless system would be something like 1.5 to 2 maximum, and a BAHA single side itself costs about 5 lakhs.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where would be the difference. But BAHA in a unilateral hearing loss is essentially a cross hearing. It's a transcranial cross.
Pragya, maybe the last question for the night. Dr. Digonto is again asking about if a patient is supposed comfortable in both BTE and RIC, is there any added benefit for opting for the RIC?
I think it would depend on the patient themselves. RIC hearing aids are cosmetically they are more appealing. RIC hearing aids, and if it is suitable for the type of for the kind of audiogram that they have, RICs can also, like, it is usually a little more comfortable. People find it a little more comfortable again because it's not occluding the ear completely, unlike a traditional BTE device, which would use a ear tip or a ear mold, which is completely occluding the device, occluding the ear canal. So it has those advantages. And at the same time, we need to think about if this person again has a chance of a rapidly progressing hearing loss, which may not come under the fitting range of a RIC device, then we would probably prefer BTE. If the person has, if it's a young child, again, we would rather go for BTE with a custom ear molds. So it would depend in if the benefit is the same with both the devices, we will then have to see all of the other factors, the physical features, the age, any associated conditions, what is the type of hearing loss, the course of progression, all of that.
Pragya, one question just dropped by. Dr. Kaustav, she is asking, what about those old age patients who had used hearing aids earlier and now they are skeptical to use a new one because of the sound disturbances, irritation, echo sounds, etc. So how do you suggest to counsel them?
See, again, the part of the counseling is to first of all understand, like, if we are giving them time, if we are taking the time to understand what were their issues with the previous hearing aid and what could have been the reason, there itself, we have to first of all build the confidence. And secondly, again, just counseling them on the face value may not be sufficient. Giving them a trial and giving them a proper trial, taking time with it, taking time to understand their perception and optimizing the hearing aid accordingly, that's the only way to go forward.
Pragya, excellent presentation and wonderful delivery of answers to the volley of questions. And a lot of congratulations your way. Now, I would like to hand over to Anjana ma'am to say some few words.
I'd really like to thank Chandan sir for chipping in and contributing to the discussion. As I said, my experience with hearing aids is still quite limited, and people like Chandan sir and a lot of other professional Viswas sir, they have a lot more experience. So it made my life a lot more easier. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Pragya, for your lucid presentation.
Thank you, ma'am.
And thank you, Biswas sir, for your expert input. And I would request Gautam Khawant sir to say a few words.
Ma'am, sir just left, I think.
Okay.
I think you can wind off.
Yeah, okay. Then my sincere thanks to all the participants from Assam and our other parts of the India who spared valuable time for our webinar. And thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.